Last week in Michigan politics, lame duck continues in Lansing as lawmakers rush to get their legislation through before the end of the year, and Republicans take control of the House in January. We take a look at some of the biggest things on the move. Plus, election law in Michigan gives more than one way to verify your identity when going into the voting booth, but under what one lawmaker says he'll be introducing next year, there would only be one way to do it. Why he believes it's a no-brainer. And people visiting One Lakeshore City are set to see a bump in how much they'll pay for parking at its most popular beach. Just not as much as was originally proposed. What city commissioners decided this week and how pushback from the public played a role. I'm Josh Alburtus, and this is your 13 on Your Side Rundown. We lead off with Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan, who announced he would run for governor in 2026 as an independent. Now it's put a lot of attention on whether an independent can win in Michigan. We talked to an expert who said this could work for Duggan, but that potential viability wouldn't necessarily carry over to just anyone. He said it depends on the details.
When Democratic Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan announced last week that he would seek the Michigan governor's office in 2026, his declaration may not have come as a surprise to some. What did come as a surprise to many, however, was his decision to run not with his current political party, but as an independent.
It's going to be interesting to see.
In a statement announcing his candidacy, Duggan wrote in part, quote, "I'm not running to be the Democrats' governor or the Republicans' governor. I'm running to be your governor." Given Duggan's high-profile persona, coupled with the Mitten State's current, very evenly divided political landscape, some are now asking one question. Can an independent win statewide in Michigan?
The two-party system has a structure. There's an organization. You can elevate a candidate. Without that, you're going to have to do it on your own. And that takes a certain kind of candidate with a certain resume.
Director of the American Communities Project at Michigan State University, Dante Chiney believes the success of an independent depends on who that independent is.
The idea that, look, I can do this on my own. I've got the name recognition. People know who I am. I have a track record to run on. I can do it this way. I don't think that opens the door to a lot of other people unless they've got a similar resume and a similar type of name recognition.
And not just who they are, but who they'd be running against.
For this to work for Duggan, those the Democrats would need to pick somebody pretty far left in their primary process so that these suburban places that I think about as much more moderate would look at the field and say like, I don't know, like Duggan might be the best choice here because I'm not going to vote for the Republican, but that Democrat's not the right person for me.
While West Michigan and the Grand Rapids suburbs in particular have been home to a unique dynamic, even here the concept is a largely open question. The one recent third-party member of Congress from the West Side, former Representative Justin Amash, who left the GOP and changed his affiliation midterm, did not seek re-election after quitting the party. But if it does work for Duggan, Chiney believes it wouldn't just be Michigan under the spotlight.
Like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, not just that, but even like Minnesota, kind of the upper Midwest. If this strategy works here, that would be interesting to see.
And at the state capitol, what are Republicans planning to do once they take back the state house in January? A state representative from West Michigan tells us his number one priority will be ID requirements for voting. Right now, under Michigan law, it does say you can verify your identity with your legal photo ID when you go to vote, but if you don't have it, you can sign an affidavit swearing that you are who you say you are, and you could face penalties if authorities find out you lied. Under what State Representative Brian Posthumus says he's going to propose, there'd seemingly be no leeway. You would need to show proof of citizenship when registering and show a valid government-issued ID when going to the polling place. He and others who had backed him up this week, signaling in their view, it's common sense.
As much as people think that it is a constitutional requirement that that photo ID is required to cast your ballot, it is not in Michigan. This is common sense. This is a no-brainer. Only U.S. citizens should be able to vote in our elections.
One interesting thing to note, Posthumous is doing this on a path that sets a very high bar. He's going to introduce this as a constitutional amendment, he says, which would need 2/3 support from both houses of the legislature and then approval from the state's voters. He says this is the way to go because of how the current photo ID language is written in the Michigan Constitution, which could not be changed by more traditional legislation. And this comes after a student from China going to school at U of M was charged, according to the Associated Press, for allegedly casting a ballot in the last election while not being a citizen. Posthumous says he's likely to put this to the legislature in mid-January. The possibility of expanding the state's bottle deposit law was a big topic in Lansing this week. Advocates say it will help the environment, but there is vocal opposition.
Bottle law.
For almost half a century, those words have become a staple in Michiganders' everyday shopping, whether they've heard them or not. How the state's bottle law works is that many carbonated drinks and soft drinks sold in the state, as well as certain alcoholic drinks, come with a deposit charge of at least 10 cents, which is then refunded to the customer if they return the bottle. Now, one state senator is aiming to make some changes.
At best, the citizens of Michigan agree that the advent of massive consumer use of bottled water wasn't something that was conceived of in 1976.
Aside from shifting how money collected would be spent, the full proposal comes with two major changes. The first would be growing what kinds of drinks can have a deposit. Even plastic water bottles, among others, would now be eligible.
Potentially 2 billion beverage containers per year that are currently going into landfills, lakes, streams, streets, and parks.
The second, what some refer to as universal redemption.
So that if you buy a beverage at Meijer, you can take it back to Costco or Trader Joe's.
But the potential for extra upfront cost on more drinks has some on the other side of the fence.
This will decrease the amount of fresh food that families may be able to initially purchase, harming customers who cannot afford to spend more upfront and requiring families to wait in long return lines to get their money back.
It's important to note lawmakers wouldn't necessarily be voting to put these changes in place. To take effect, these changes would also have to be approved by the majority of Michigan voters during the 2026 midterm elections. And when it comes to government transparency, Michigan has received a lot of criticism over the years. One of the biggest reasons for that is because requests for certain public records under what's called the state's Freedom of Information Act do not apply to state legislatures or the executive office of the governor or lieutenant governor. Now legislation is on the move to change that. The legislation would establish FOIA request coordinators for the state House, Senate, and for all other public bodies, which under the new definition would include the governor and lieutenant governor's offices. There would still be restrictions on what kinds of documents could be exempt from a FOIA request. When it comes to the governor and lieutenant governor, for example, that includes records that were, quote, created, prepared, owned, used, in the possession of, or retained by either of them, their employees, and their offices before these bills would go into effect. The legislation was already passed by the Senate and, after being passed out of House committee this week, now moved to the full House. 1 week after the CEO of United Healthcare was shot and killed, police say a ghost gun may have been used. It's renewing a debate whether to clamp down on these untraceable guns in Michigan. We look at what the different sides are saying.
Early Tuesday morning, Denise Weeks sat before lawmakers describing when she says her son was shot by a ghost gun in 2021.
There's no reason whatsoever that a minor, someone with a mental illness, a domestic abuser, or a criminal should be able to get these kits so easily and put them together.
What makes these firearms so dangerous is not the gun aspect, but the ghost.
Typically assembled from parts a person can have 3D printed and sent to them in kits, ghost guns get their name from the fact that they do not have serial numbers.
Unlike traditional firearms, ghost guns can be purchased or created without background checks, assembled by individuals with no firearms training, be completely untraceable by law enforcement, or acquired by individuals who would legally be prohibited from purchasing a traditional firearm.
And they've gained even more attention after, according to ABC News, police announced they had found what the New York police chief believed appeared to be a ghost gun after arresting the suspect in the killing of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Now on Tuesday morning, Michigan lawmakers moving on a pair of bills aimed at clamping down on firearms without serial numbers.
This bill requires all firearms to be serialized. To be clear, the legislation before you does not ban guns, but it does prohibit firearms from being ghosts.
But in the eyes of others, that's exactly what they do.
This bill would ban tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of firearms already lawfully possessed in the state that do not have serial numbers and are not in criminal hands.
Talk of reforming Michigan's no-fault auto law is picking up as the end of the state's legislative session approaches, raising awareness for those with catastrophic injuries that lost coverage during the 2019 update. Michigan's no-fault insurance law began in 1973, making it so that anyone involved in a crash would have to file claims with their own insurance provider, regardless of who caused the crash. The law was amended in 1978, providing unlimited medical coverage for people severely injured in a crash. The 2019 changes removed unlimited medical care and cut in-home medical work pay by 45%. Critics of the change say this means crash victims no longer receive adequate in-home care for severe or permanent injuries. Supporters of the reform say the fee schedule reins in overcharging for medical providers and keeps auto insurance rates low. But one couple injured in a crash this year say that's not the case at all. 13 on Your Side's Lauren Baker has their story and looks at the changes lawmakers say could be on the way.
It's a love story that's been years in the making.
He makes me laugh all the time.
Carrie Ann Sepla and Jeremy Blocher worked together more than 15 years ago and went their separate ways. But a year ago, while on the dance floor...
Wonderful. Yes, wonderful, but...
exceptional, amazing.
Positive and upbeat.
These two locked eyes, sparked up a conversation, and started a new chapter together. But what they didn't know is that new chapter...
I wouldn't want to be going through this with anybody else.
...would test their ability to go through trials together. In October, while riding on a motorcycle celebrating their 1-year anniversary, the two were injured in a crash near Sparta. Both were hospitalized, Carrie Ann losing part of her leg, Jeremy also wheelchair bound.
There are days when I pray to God, and there are days when I weep, and there are days when I scream.
But they say the physical recovery hasn't been the most frustrating part. It's been working with insurance companies. They say because of the 2019 changes to no-fault insurance, their insurance and the other driver's insurance haven't covered the care or housing they need.
I feel like I've kind of exhausted all of the resources.
Their nurse case manager, Ashley White, and Brian Harrison with AdvisaCare say medical agencies have also struggled to help them and other clients because of the cuts made from the law change.
It's not that we don't want to do the work. It's not that we can't work to find the people. It's that truly we don't have the overhead or the pockets to sustain it, unfortunately.
Both say changes need to be made at the state level, and that could happen. State Representative Julie Rogers, along with State Senator Sarah Anthony and Mary Kavanaugh, have introduced bills in their respective houses that can make changes to no-fault insurance.
The three bills together, again, it would revise the fee schedule, and then it would change how that utilization review process is done so that it's more an individualized case-by-case rather than a carte blanche 20-visit cap.
Rogers says the bills have bipartisan support and could pass in the lame duck session before the year ends. And if it does, it could help people like Blocher and Sepla get the help they need.
Well, we're hoping that eventually there's light at the end of the tunnel. We're hoping eventually our life can continue together.
That was Lauren Baker reporting. 3 years after a mass shooting at Oxford High School, Michigan lawmakers are set to introduce and potentially vote on new protections for schools. 5 bills will be put to the State House after that chamber's Education Committee approved them last Wednesday. They look to establish behavioral assessment plans for students and a team to manage them in public and private schools. They also seek to help police create better and more clear action plans when responding to a mass shooting event. While all of these things are in the works under the Capitol dome, some initiatives are now reaching the finish line. 6 bills surrounding road safety were signed by Governor Gretchen Whitmer this week. 2 of the bills aim to make roadways safer for construction workers by allowing automated speed enforcement systems in work zones in Michigan. The automated systems can only be used while workers are present and can be used for issuing traffic citations. Another 3-bill package aims to make public school buses safer by allowing district school buses equipped with camera systems to expand enforcement of traffic violations for failing to stop. The package also allocates money received from violations to the school district where the violation happened to be used for transportation safety-related projects. And the final bill in the package designated stretches of I-75 and M-59 to 2 fallen officers who were killed after being hit by cars during traffic stops. A Democratic-backed package aims at expanding Michigan's unemployment benefits and is heading to the governor's desk. The main focus of the bills is to increase unemployment benefit amounts and duration. The legislation will increase the benefit period for recipients from 20 weeks to 26 weeks, while also gradually increasing the amount of the benefits over the next 3 years. Beginning in 2025, the weekly benefits would go from $362 to $446. Then in 2026, that will increase to $530, and in 2027, it will increase to $614. The weekly amount will then increase in years beyond that based on changes in the Consumer Price Index. The legislation will also attempt to address some concerns with the state unemployment insurance agency's handling of overpayment and recovery of benefits, which was heavily scrutinized during and after the pandemic. For weeks, the city of Muskegon has been the place for a lot of debate after the city proposed raising costs for non-residents parking at their most popular beach. Coming up, what they eventually decided this week and how the voices of the people weighed in. In Muskegon County, the cost to park at Muskegon's most popular beach is going up, but not as much as was originally planned.
We're all seniors, and we're getting to the point where we can't afford it because the prices went up.
Last month, the Muskegon City Commission voted to raise parking rates at Pure Marquette Park for non-residents to $20 on weekends and $10 during the week. But after a lot of feedback from the community, they voted to amend their plan Tuesday night. City leaders say the increase is necessary to pay for upkeep and repairs to all of the city's parks.
One of the questions was, what did we do before this? Quite frankly, one of the things that we did was not invest in our other parks. We did not invest as much as we should have. We had a significant deferred maintenance backlog in our 33 other parks across the city. We were spending the majority of our parks budget at Pure Marquette.
Now, non-residents will pay $15 on Saturdays and Sundays and $10 on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. Wednesdays will be free. And a season pass will still go up from $20 to $40.
Take that away from us because we can't afford to buy the passes now that they're $40. $40 is a week's worth of groceries.
The city is also offering a buy one, get one season pass through January. People who live in the city get 2 free parking passes per household. To Ottawa County now, where its Board of Commissioners this week approved the authorization of a separation agreement with their interim county administrator. The agreement pertaining to interim administrator Ben Wetmore passed after over an hour of closed session. But Wetmore wasn't the only one. The board also voting in favor of a separation agreement for executive aide Jordan Epperson, whose hiring led to an age discrimination lawsuit against the former administrator who hired him. Per 13 on your side's past reporting, that lawsuit was later settled for $225,000. The Acrisure Amphitheater is ready to have Live Nation provide promotion and booking services after 2 Kent County boards approved a contract last week. The Kent County Board of Commissioners approved the Grand Rapids Kent County Convention Arena Authority, also known as the CAA, to vote on a proposed contract with Live Nation. The approval was required due to the length of the contract, 25 years. The board narrowly decided to allow the CAA to make that decision with a vote of 8-7. But some county board members raised concerns about Live Nation and the lack of competition they feel for the contract with the amphitheater.
I will say that I'm extremely concerned with the fact that, if I'm not mistaken, both D and E came to the board without there being some kind of bidding process. And especially considering the fact that the Live Nation is being sued by the Department of Justice for being a monopoly.
Despite the narrow approval by the Board of Commissioners, the CAA unanimously approved the contract in a 7-0 vote. Live Nation also agreed to provide $20 million to support the construction and their operations at the amphitheater. The CAA is also contracted with Live Nation to provide services for Van Andel Arena and DeVos Place. Both boards also approved a contract with ASM Global to provide food services at the amphitheater. And that's the rundown for your week in Michigan politics. Be sure to keep up with all the top political stories of the day, both on air and online at 13onyourside.com. We'll see you next week.